Welcome to Dark Days Radio presents Dark Iron, a Worlds of Iron Kingdoms, Iron Kingdoms RPG podcast. I think that's what I call it. It's War Machines RPG setting known as Iron Kingdoms, and I'm one of the regular hosts, Chris. I'm joined once more by James. Hello, James.
Hey there.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. I've just finished my card game recently, and I'm moving on to starting a new project in Unreal, doing some digital games. So that's good fun.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I've got loads of stuff going on, which I can't talk about quite yet with regard to gaming wise. But I have been playing some War Machine lately.
Fantastic.
And since we last recorded, I've actually painted a Cryx army. And I've played a couple of games with them and played some games with the War Machine starter set that came out. And they just recently, just the other day, yesterday, announced the new War Machine starter set, which has for Warlocks and War Beast based factions. So it's a Trollkin versus Chimera box, so plastic as well, which is great. So that's quite exciting. Right, well, we're going to dive into the main topic because obviously, like I said, there's the only other news is that other than the new releases coming out for War Machine, Strange Light Workshop is still awaiting release, and at the end of March, March 22nd is ChillCon, and I'm running demos of War Machine there, and we'll be doing the same on the weekend after at Lead and Steel. Both events take place in Sheffield. So our main topic is Cryx, the Nightmare Empire. So, I'm going to briefly get through the history of Cryx. There's a lot, but it'll give a good basis for then the character types, the options, and ideas for stories set around these characters and this location. So, Cryx is essentially this ancient kingdom that's existed for. Well, I say ancient kingdom. It's in the order of like around about like a good over. Let's just say it's a good over 2,000 years old. It existed before the time of the first Orgoth invasion of Western Amoran, and it's located on what are known as the Shard Isles, which are to the west of Western Amoran. So it's an archipelago, and it's a kingdom it's an empire that is made up of both the living and the undead. So the landscape of this island is frightful and dangerous, and for the living it's hard going, for the dead it's pretty hard going as well. So we're going to quickly summarize. So the head of the entire empire is Torok, who is the dragon father. So the dragons in the Iron Kingdom setting, James, are massive. They're like they are. I want to say they're verging on like 20, 30 meters tall.
Blimey, yes, okay.
They are gargantuan. Okay.
Yeah.
And Torok is the father of all dragons. So what he has is what's known as an Arthanc, which is this heartstone that exists in his body that he can open up his chest and basically like slice shards off, and those become autonomous in the sense that they eventually grow a form around them that becomes another dragon. So he's done that a number of times to create more dragons, so his children, in a sense. So that's what contains his essence, his soul, his will, his magical ability. And when he arrived at the Shard Isles, it was basically a land for pirates. You know, it just had lots of indigenous people living there who were doing whaling and fishing, but also some settlements that were home to pirates that played the 1,000 cities of Amoran at that time. Torok arrived, and he'd already created his progeny, and he'd been seriously injured, so he fled to the Shard Isles, bent the pirate kings to his will, destroying their fleets, including the massive ship known as the Atramentus, which turned into a ghost ship. So Torok has the ability to bless upon people the immortality through being undead, and that's what he did to these pirate kings. He made them into the first lich lords, so they basically became liches, lords of undead, and began to teach them the magic of necromancy. And so this empire, this kingdom, began and existed for 1,600 plus years, and were engaging on raids against the Thousand Kingdoms. So they would be leading armies of thralls, which are basically animated skeletons and zombies, and ghosts, and that's basically predominantly what the armies of the Cryx consisted of, as well as their ships. Now, when the Orgoth arrived, they basically put a dampener on Torok's plan. So Torok was essentially wanting to build up his kingdom, his empire, so he could fight against his progeny. So the Orgoth arrive, invade the Thousand Kingdoms, and Torok's like, damn, that wasn't what I was expecting. Torok wasn't also expecting the Orgoth also to be in league with the Infernals. So this is, obviously a different type of magic arriving, a different approach to immortality, all of these things. So Torok decided not to engage against them directly, and wanted to watch. And the Orgoth happily built their citadel, Dread Dracarun, on the northern Shard Isles. They did try to invade the kingdom of Cryx proper, but Torok stirred for the first time in centuries and obliterated the entire Orgoth fleet that had threatened the shores of Cryx.
Oh, dang.
So he wiped them out, and then he just held back, wanting to learn what the Orgoth knew, their secrets, their magic, etc. And also knowing that the Orgoth, to a certain extent, would at times come into conflict with his children and their own forces. So he could learn a bit from the Orgoth. And as we know, in the Iron Kingdoms, the Orgoth occupation continued until the gift of magic came along, which brought about, basically because humans weren't able to do magic except for divine magic. Now they have the gift of magic. That brings about the ability of new forms of necromancy, of course. So you've got these magic users who can innately channel magic rather than invoking the gods. And so some of those obviously would start to be tempted down the path of doing necromancy. And those presented, of course, potential recruits for the Cryxian forces. And of course, we know that some of those magic users would go on to be warcasters, people that would control warjacks. So now you've got all this new technology and magic being created thanks to the gift of magic. So you've now got new forms of alchemy, firearms, mechanica, the warjacks. And so the forces of Cryx take their time quietly as the rebellion against the Orgoth is going on to steal these secrets. And they did steal those secrets. And from that, you basically get the formation of what's known as the what's it called? The what is it called? It's mechanic. Why can't I think of its name? It's like the Necronomicon, but basically it's this. I can't remember its name. It's basically a book. It's the first kind of there's a few creators of warjacks who merge that with necromancy, and it becomes this, and with also magic of the Orgoth, which is infernal magic, and that is the basis for the necrotech of Cryx, and so what Cryxian forces fuse together is warjack technology, some infernal technology, infernal magic, necromancy, and they create warjacks that combine, what we consider as normal mechanica, but also there's a lot of usage of bones within the armaments and the chassis, because on the shard isles there are bone graveyards out in the jungles of massive beasts, and so they reuse those bones to make the warjacks. So that's what gives rise to Helljacks, Bonejacks. They also incorporate Mechanica, so that magically powered technology, into thralls. So now you've got undead skeletons and zombie type creatures that have got Mechanica prosthetics on them, which would be like buzzsaws or the ability to spew forth jets of corrosive fluids, all of that stuff. So that's a significant change to the Cryxian forces, and they will also quite happily dig up any dead person in Western Amoran during the rebellion, because they would bring them back from the dead and then interrogate them for even more secrets. So even in death, you don't rest with Cryx. Oh, no. Then finally, the Orgoth forces were fled Western Amoran, and they withdrew to Drer Dracarung, that citadel on the Shard Isles. And of course, it's there that the Cryxian forces went hello and ambushed them with their new necromechanical forces. 3 Lich Lords died in the final battle there, as did a group of Orgoth war witches who enacted basically this suicidal, like, magical A-bomb that obliterated the citadel and everything around it. But from the survivors, Torok was able to take prisoners of Orgoth war witches, various Orgoth relics, and also the means by which they built their massive and quite powerful sailing ships. So Torok is now in possession of a whole load of new technology, magic, infernal magic, other magics relating to immortality, various strange magical relics, and the ability to make certain magical weapons, and also the ability to reinforce, the technology essentially to reinforce and build a new fleet ready to invade the kingdoms of Western Amoran. So, off the back of that, then, as the Cryxian forces built up, and as the kingdoms, the people of Western Amoran reformed, and they had the Iron Kingdoms Treaty and the emergence of the new kingdoms of Signar, Kador, Lael, and Ord. Cryx obviously went back on their game of trying to get onto the waging little little kind of espionage skirmishes, that type of things, assassinations into these new kingdoms, to use that as cover to steal more technology, steal more magics, and also resources, primarily what's known as necrotite. So necrotite is this material that's kind of like coal, but it burns hotter, it burns faster, but it's very polluting, and it forms at places where a lot of death has occurred. So you mine it from beneath, like, battlefields, mass graveyards, things like that. Mass graves. So it's like this solidified death essence, and so that's what they're often trying to mine from the Western Amoran and do it without being noticed. They would commit various raids, and the first true show of force of Cryxian forces was in 584 after Rebellion, and these were diversions enough so that some Cryxian forces were able to push deep inland and gain a foothold in the mountains and forgotten Orgoth tombs and dungeons, because of course they knew where all these hidden fortresses and citadels were. And leading these was Ironlich Asphyxius, and he basically created beneath the Thornwood, which is this dense, massive forest between Kador and Signar. he was able to create there what hidden underground, these necrofactoriums, which are where they would build more warjacks and helljacks and the death ripper type warjacks. And within the Thornwood is also the remains of a kingdom that used to exist that created creatures not dissimilar to what Everblight is able to create. So what are called dragon spawn. So there's a lot going on in this old dense forest that's massive for the Cryxian forces to take advantage of. And that's basically where their base of operations is, still performing sea raids on Kador and Signar from their islands. And all of this then essentially came to a head where all-out war between Kador and Signar happens, and Lael is invaded, and the Cryxian forces essentially are just raiding here, there, and everywhere to steal, wrecks of warjacks, to get cortexes, to dig up the dead to reuse to build their own forces, and obviously to mine more necrotech. All the while extending their own forces to try and hunt down the kin, the children, the spawn of Torok. One of whom, as I've just mentioned, is Everblight. So Everblight was originally slain by the forces of Eos in 390 AR, and their Arthanc was found by this ogre, I think it's an ogre called Thagrosh, who took it into his body and became like the vessel of Everblight. And from him, other warlocks were created, and they would create dragon spawn, which are their war beasts. And they went north and took over the kingdom of a group of elves known as the Nis. But the alliance of other dragonkin was broken when Everblight slew and consumed one of the other dragonkin called Pyro Malfic. And this all basically leads to Torok finally taking flight once more, leaving his temple in Cryx, on the Isle of Cryx, to take a chance to take out some of his children and reclaim their Arthancs and consume them, which, goes pretty badly. And you can imagine that you've got all these massive dragons fighting in the air above you, and from their blood, as it hits the earth, more dragons spawn, more of these monsters are created. So it's a complete, it's a complete mess. Though I think in that fight, I'm not quite, I think I'm certain, yeah. Torok's able to consume at least one of the Arthancs before taking a blow and had to flee. Christopher and went to the aid of the child. Oh no, and weirdly during this fight, even the Signaran forces who had possession of the Arthanc that they were trying to steal, they fed it to one of Torok's children to have it fight against Torok and the others. So weird alliances between Torok and his children and other factions going on. With Torok once more wounded, he basically goes off to heal again. And during this time, the Denegra, who was a prominent warcaster and also trained in the secrets of the Orgoth War Witches, is elevated to Lich Lord, and she basically has consistently had a fight with a Signaran warcaster called Victoria Haley, because that's her twin sister. Oh. So there's a lot going on between these two characters within War Machine, as they are playable characters in the games and have look kind of similar. They both use spears as their main weapons, but yeah, you've got like two twin sisters who are on opposite factions. But Denegra eventually dies at the hands of her sister and then is revived as one of the undead. And once Asphyxious, during the Infernal Invasion at the end of 3rd edition War Machine, disappears, Denegra basically takes his role and becomes the new Lich Lord, and eventually is in charge of the entire empire of Cryx while Torok is still slumbering. So the claiming is that Infernal Invasion I spoke of that happens in 612 AR. Lots of sleeper agents and cults rise up who are aligned with the Infernals. And you can imagine that you've got these infernal worshippers. You've got the emissaries of the Infernals themselves coming into breaching into the reality of the world and bringing with them various demonic creatures to use as their own kind of equivalent of warjacks and war beasts. And you've got the forces of Cryx, who are obviously enjoying claiming souls because they're into undead necromancy and all of that. And they see the Infernals as a massive threat to Torok's plans and their own, existence. So the battle against the Infernals actually sees the forces of Cryx team up with Kador, Signar, Ord, Lael, and other forces to turn back the infernal invaders and banish them from reality. And it's at that battle that Asphyxious essentially gets destroyed. So he's this Iron Lich, one of these great necromancers of the kingdom of Cryx. There's about I think there's 13 of them. So Asphyxious gets killed during these battles, reforged and cleansed by the cult of Cyrus. So he becomes no longer undead, but gets a new metal body to exist in, and eventually flees to another galaxy, which is the Cyrus galaxy, through a gateway with loads of people fleeing the Infernals. So that's what sets up the Warcaster war game and setting for that, which happens many more thousands of years in the future from War Machine. So that's why Denegra assumes the throne. And essentially, that is where we're up to with the roleplay game, because the roleplay game, Iron Kingdom's Requiem, takes place after the claiming and the Battle of Hengehold. And so we're into this kind of period of time, this lull between great conflicts and massed armies, as the Infernals are gone, and Kador, Signar, Cryx, their forces are obviously going to be depleted from battling these demonic invaders. So, what more can we say about the Isles of Cryx itself? As I said, dense jungles, rugged coastlines, dangerous reefs surround it, with obviously the good, almost 1,000 years of industry powered by necrotech. The island is highly polluted, especially near the main, the capital and the main centers of manufacture. So you've got basically factories pumping out tons and tons of, fumes from necrotite and coal, which just leaves a blanket of ash over everything. And that also goes on to, pollute. Not that pollution also is mutating the local flora and fauna. So a lot of the jungle creatures and plant life have adapted to this pollution and become much more dangerous. And as I said, I said the blood of the dragons creates, from it spawns what we call dragon spawn. So you can imagine that mutating aura. So Torok himself is almost like you can consider as like radioactive with necromantic energy, and that is also mutating people and changing things around them. And in fact, if you're just a regular human worshipper, and or even a necromancer, a living necromancer, and you try and go visit the Temple of Torok, you can't be there too long, or else your body will just slowly disintegrate.
Oh, yeah, that's a bit intense.
Yeah, the weather, as you can understand, there's a lot of rain, sweltering heat, a short dry season, lashing, storms lash the coastline. So you've got this sweltering heat mixed with an almost blackened sky due to the constant manufacturing going on. It's there's going to be thick smog. It's going to be hard to breathe. So for humans on that island and other living things, it's particularly difficult. The main places the main population centers. So you've got Skell is the capital. It's basically a mausoleum city. It's filled with the mainly the dead because it's where Torok resides. There are factories of necromechanica at the center of the city is the Black Temple, which has got massive domes where Torok is venerated, and besides that is Torok's actual citadel where the dragon resides and reaches into its sky, where at the summit is where Torok rests. Constant, like I say, ash falling like snow. The Church of Torok holds power there, and it's also where the Lich Lords gather and where war witches dabble in their dark magics. Though I did say there is some manufacture there. Most of it, though, now takes place in Dregsmouth or Lichgate. So the capital mainly has some living there and some undead. They're there to worship Torok. There isn't really a city guard because the fact that there's so many undead and Torok itself is like a gargantuan dragon. There's not really need for security in the same sense. Blackwater is the largest city, and the tall trees at the top of the fjord block the sun, so it hugs the sides of this fjord. The weather makes the buildings rot, as you can understand. It's sweltering, and it's possibly the most normal place there is. So it's home to lots of mortals. There's a black market trade. Again, there's no official city guard. The security is paid for by those who have coin, so they buy their own security. There's lots of tunnels cut into the cliff, and from there are shops and surgeries. There's a meat market where actual dead are brought to for sale along with slaves, and from that, those dead bodies, those cadavers, will be bought by the various necrotecs and necromancers that live in Blackwater, or they'll take them on to other cities. And then there's a floating platform called the Smolders that's out in the middle of the fjords, which is a massive floating island where on top of it are all the alchemical factories are built. So this fjord, with these sheer cliff faces where the city is built, the settlement's built into, the waters that run through this fjord are absolutely toxic. You can imagine they're just like chucking all the alchemical waste into it, and all the offcuts of the dead that they don't need. Any viscera just goes into the waters there. It's pretty gross. Dregsmouth is the main center of the war industry on the west coast, away from the enemy ships. So it's on the very west of Emoran. So it's not on the coastline facing the rest of the Iron Kingdoms. It's facing out into the ocean, and that's where, obviously, because it's so far and defended, then that's where all the massive black ships that are built using Orgoth technology are made, along with legions of Mechanthruls and Jacks. Around it, there are vast mines of necrotite that are being mined. There is the Scaleflow River, which is dredged for fuel, so they dredge that for more necrotite. And the factories are massive in scale. They're just essentially temples in their own right. Lichgate is at the foot of the mountains and the bogs of Dragonmore, in the shadow of a volcano. And again, it's got some necrofactorums. They're newer. They're built there because of the destruction of the ones that used to be under the Thornwood. But most of the manufacture there is mundane weapons. You've then got Castle Moorcraig, which was once home to one of the pirate lords who did not bow to Torok, and it's now just a blasted pile of rubble. Dragonmore at the north of the island is where the Atramentus was transformed by Blighted Breath of Toruk. And it's sparsely populated. It's mainly goblins and trollkin that mine the area. Dragon's Roost stands there, which is a fortress that watches over the Wind Watcher's Passage. So it's this passage that's of calm water that leads out to the ocean, and it's from there various raids are launched onto the mainlands. So that is most of the place that we've got of Cryx.
Yeah.
There's some other places that I'm not going to get into because they're basically along the Broken Coast and other ones of the Shard Isles, but they don't really make up the they don't make up the kingdom itself of Cryx, so I'm not going to cover them for now. We can always cover them another time because they could be other places that you might want to, investigate if you were playing pirates that aren't all just Cryxian undead, necromancy types. So I think that provides a good basis for the history of the kingdom, and we can then start looking at what we can play and the type of characters that you've got there. So I'm going to just rattle through quickly, James, the type of races that that Cryx is home to, because some of these are within the core book of Iron Kingdom's Requiem, and some of them are new to the Nightmare Empire book. So obviously there's humans, and if you do play a human, there are some particular rules for how you play Shard Islanders. So it'll explain how they look a bit different. I think actually these are in the Requiem book. So you might, because of the Dragon's Blight, humans that are affected by that will have like blackened eyes and have growths on their skin that is like kind of dark and scaly, and their teeth might be a bit sharper, and you can see dark veins on them. So they're obviously afflicted by this blight. There are obviously trollkin that live there, and gobbers and bogrin. Maybe some elves might have decided to take home, but they're not a particularly important faction there, or species. Sorry. You've also got Ogren. Again, they've been afflicted, and so they and trollkin on the Shard in the Kingdom of Cryx tend to have darker. Their skin is darkened by the blight because it's this. You've got to think about it. It's like being afflicted by this mutagenic kind of coal dust. So it's going to like bake into your skin. It's going to cause your skin to have growths on it. Obviously, trollkin and ogren are hardier people than humans, and so over generations that mutation has been passed down, and so they are far more dangerous because of it. Perhaps the most important new faction, I say species, that gets added to it is the Statistics. They are they've got, so they're basically humanoid, but they from their head sprout horns, a bit like how would we say, they're kind of like centaur-like horns. They're not centaurs themselves, so they're very goat-like, or maybe
satyrs is probably a like a good cultural waystone for it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so again they have they're a bit faster on their feet than humans. They obviously can use those horns to in combat. They also, because their race was on the Shard Isles and was effectively their race was polluted by Dragon Blight. They have grown to become resistant to poisons and disease and necrotic, damage types. So in other words, they're more resilient to necromantic energies in that sense. And unlike what used to be in previous editions of the RPG and the wargame setting, not all of the Statixis are female. So there used to be this thing, they were like kind of like Amazons in that sense. They're not anymore. That's been retconned out of the game. So you can play males quite happily. Or whatever you want to play, whichever gender. Because Iron Kingdoms is, I will reinforce, and this is something in the that I spotted in the writing for the new plastic starter set. One of the named characters for Signar in the war game is described as being gay, which is great. And so War Machine is happily, and this is from having worked on this book and with the line developer, we've happily retconned things to, if you want to play, a male, female, non-specific character for any of these things, do so. If anything, being undead is a really, is a and the necromancy and necrotech that is available to Cryx opens up some really interesting potentials of characters that you could portray some sort of transition even.
Absolutely. Like there's I suppose I'll keep some of my thoughts for later, but one of the big things going through this book has been quite how much options are available that really I haven't seen in a lot of stuff.
Well, that's good. That's good to know. So the other kind of character types you've got in here, you've got that you play, and they're not. We don't specify what their origin species is because it makes things really complicated. And I think you just have to maybe, if you want to make one that is specific to a particular, origin, then work with your games master. So we've got Revenants. Speaks for itself, isn't it? It's animated dead. So you're basically playing a character who is dead, and you're basically a zombie, but you still have control of your mind. And then the other one is Spectre, which is where you're playing a ghost. So you're undead, but again, what that origin is, are you a dead trollkin? Are you a ghost of an elf? That, you might want to work with your GM to maybe adjust the stats to represent those nuances. But yeah, so James, I mean, we're looking at these new kind of archetypes, races. Sorry,
yeah,
we call them races in the book, but I mean they're effectively origins. Oh yeah, there we go. New essence. There's an essence called Blighted. That's the one. If you take that in combination with your character, that gives you that ties you into that idea that you're from an origin that's been changed by the blighted essence of Torok and his children. And there's a few abilities that you could get due to it as your character grows. So yeah, what did you think of all these?
So I thought there was some really. Before I even got to the classes, I was sitting down and being like, "Ooh, I'd play. I think this would be interesting to play with that." So Revenants, for example, one of the types of Revenants has a like an anti-healing aura, and I mean the Revenants anyway are really interesting as like an undead, often undead in like a standard Dungeons and Dragons kind of setting are almost just a stand-in for I need to throw something at you that you can't really talk to and isn't going to interact and isn't intelligent. It's just bad, and you can hit it without feeling bad about it. Revenants are interesting from a roleplay perspective because you're someone who is no longer alive. Like, what does that mean for you? Like, maybe you were Signarian and you've ended up in Cryx, and how do you feel about the fact that you've got a new lease on unlife?
Yeah, exactly right.
But you're not somewhere that you want to be, or you're somewhere where maybe like you died fighting. So it's like interesting role play possibilities. There's a lot of stuff there to make you feel undead.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a lot of the kind of things that you would worry about as a a mortal aren't really your problem anymore.
Yeah. So to give you some background, Banes are, I guess, are your revenants that are heavily, combat orientated. Um, as it says that, and that makes sense because in the war game, Banes are a type of like, let's just call them as like undead knights. That they would generally be the unit that has heavy armor. So that makes sense with them. Deathbound. What have we got for Deathbound?
When they die, they go into a soul form, and you regain hit points, and then when you're near your body, you can come back. You can reform your body, which sounded really interesting to get you back into a fight if you're a class that happens to like drop down quite a lot if you can't keep your character alive.
Yeah. And obviously, Scarlock is, you're playing a revenant of a person or someone that obviously, or a race that has a propensity for magic, which is good, because what more, if you want to, it basically means you can play a lich. You can play a lich, which is always going to be fun.
Yeah, and they've got one of the things I'm a sucker for with a roleplay character is having a few spells from a source, and the fact that you get to pick a cantrip and then you get some spells at like 3rd and 5th level, and it's like those are always nice to have on something like my poor paladin. The amount of times I'm like, this thing is standing 35 feet away, so there is nothing I can like. This turn is a wash as I just waddle up to them. So and then the interesting stuff.
And then the other new type of character option, origin, is Spectre. So basically playing ghosts. What did you make of this one?
Yeah, so one of the things they have is some built-in flight speed, which is like very interesting from a like if I was going to put on my min-maxing hat, then your Spectre just floats above the battlefield shooting things with cantrips. So I imagine lots dungeon masters put a lot of your fights indoors and in short dungeons. Have nowhere that can't be reached by a person with a stick.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but the other thing is to bear in mind is that if a Spectre attacks in any way, it becomes corporeal. And this is the Iron Kingdoms, so people have ranged weapons quite happily.
Yes. Yeah,
people have rifles. People have magical rifles. It doesn't even matter if you're even if you were floating high up and incorporeal. If you've got magical shot, you can hit a ghost.
Yeah, like that. That's the downside of flying, right? You might be, I'm floating above everyone. It's like, cool. How much cover is there in there? Yeah, up in the sky. But yeah, they're really interesting. They have equipment that can be bound to them, so that's a really interesting way to deal with the fact that if you're incorporeal, how do you give someone a magic item if they don't have a body to put it on? So that's pretty cool. And they as well. What's the thing? They also, I feel, work quite nicely if you want to be a sorcerer or a wizard or something. Having a spectre feels like it could be quite interesting. You could really lean into like, I'm going to be a spooky ghost teleporting around and doing illusions and tricking people. Like if you wanted to do it almost like I'm going to live the haunted house fantasy.
Yeah, and then they've got, and I mean into that they've got their spectral powers that allow you to do some of that as well.
Yeah.
And they've got Banes. So there's a lot of like customization on the characters to make specters feel kind of unique to each other.
Yeah. Oh, I've just had an idea. A spectral bard, right?
Yeah.
They take the job of being a scary ghost really seriously, like they were a performer, and all they're looking for is an audience to be like, I'm going to give these people the fright of their life that will be a tale that they can tell forevermore.
I mean, the thing is, right, I would say in combat, specters are perhaps the most complicated fucking race there is, possibly. I don't know if they're that complicated because if you're gonna do an attack, you're gonna become corporeal. Fine, you're basically gonna manifest. you can only carry so much equipment in the sense of if you want to pass through a building, anything that's not bound to you is going to like drop off you.
Yeah.
And you're pretty hard to kill because obviously you're a ghost. So if you drop to 0 hit points, you're bound to a person, object from your past, and you return to it, and you begin essentially start restoring hit points while you're essentially inside the item or person. And you can have a number of those which you're bound to. So, I will give you my thoughts on it because I designed this. It was basically with this was trying to get the feel like you are a ghost, but also putting a lot of like threat in there because you don't need to eat, you don't need to drink, you don't need to rest. If you don't do anything, generally you're hard to hit unless someone performs a magical based attack against you.
Yeah, makes sense.
It was more how to balance that with their combat abilities, because obviously the archetype the archetype that everyone will want to try and play with it is the pistol wraith, the undead pistolier, because that's almost iconic of the Iron Kingdoms. And it's like, well, really, you don't need, even as a ghost, then it means you can take quite a few more risks. So you don't even need armor, because you're gonna, if you go, oh, I'll drop to 0 hit points, I'm just gonna have to rest it out in with my the item I'm bound to that might be hidden somewhere, and just rest it out for a bit there before returning. And I feel like the Banes were a way of, like, again, kind of balancing the fact that as your character becomes more powerful and combine more items to you to make them a bit more useful, you're gonna, as you grow in power, you're gonna have more particular ways you can be harmed.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was, and again, I guess you could min-max it and stuff, but I feel that there's a lot of stuff there that you can do. There's a lot of story potential. Like,
absolutely.
The classic example I give is you are a say you're playing a gun mage of Signar, right? And but you have in possession the pistol that was given to you that was in your family's possession and was your grandfather's pistol, or your grandmother's, whoever, who was and they were a highwayman who died as a highwayman, executed for their crimes, but are still bound to it. And they're bound to it because they're trying to, like, make reparations for their crimes. So you carry around one of the items which your ghostly grandparents there in, and they talk to you through it, and then will manifest from it to be seen as a ghost and to fight with you. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's also quite interesting for for potentially, like, if you have a quest giving NPC in your story, someone who can, like, stick with the party, and they can't manifest all the time, but they can be roused to drop some information, some hints, some
oh yeah, they're definitely a good Gandalf type character to kind of, because, like, they've got the benefit, we don't know how old that ghost could be. They could be a ghost from 200, 300 years ago.
Yeah, and antagonists as well. If you have a ghost like stalking the party, they can kill it, and it goes back to wherever its locus is. There's definitely some interesting options. And while they have quite a lot of traits in the book, I think a lot of it is, like, it needs to be carefully worded when it's written down. But once you've got it on your sheet, you'll be like, cool, yeah, I know, I can fly, cool, I know I've got dark vision, great. Like,
a lot of it's so obvious. A lot of it's just codified obviousness of you're fucking dead.
Yeah, like, as soon as you're getting into, like, very specific rules terminology that you find in things like, a tabletop role-playing game or a card game or something, it can sometimes take a lot of words to say something that is very straightforward.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, there's a lot of stuff, like terminology for, like, the Banes, like, you can't cross, like, potentially you could, you may find you can't cross running water, or you're harmed by silver weapons, or so forth. And that's just like, that's pretty, I don't know, it's fairly easy, or sunlight harms you and things like that. Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's definitely an origin. Like, I know on paper it looks like a lot, but actually, it's not that much. I think the only complicated things in there is, even that's not that complicated. Grave goods isn't that complicated. It's just saying you can't have you can't take with you many items, because the moment you go incorporeal, they're going to drop to the ground.
Yeah.
Or just like how you regenerate, from being killed. But that's it. You're just, in game, like I said, you could take quite a few risks with this character.
Yeah, I feel like it offers a lot of opportunities for you to play something, and something as well that's very different. Like, I've made so many characters now that, like, the opportunity to do something that pretty much isn't offered elsewhere is neat.
I'm trying to think what else is offered in the thing, and
there's
yeah,
a
go on.
couple of there was a variant of Ogryn who they had the ability. One of the things that they can do is they have the ability to use a two-handed weapon in one hand, and I know that's quite a mechanic. I mean, yes, they've got their lore changes, but mechanically that is quite interesting. You could have someone like a ranger with a heavy crossbow and a shield, turning them almost into like
Oh God.
an artillery placement almost. Or, I mean, I
Yeah.
think Ogryn can carry cannons, so you could have a cannon and a shield, just shooting everything up. And even for like a ranger-esque class, if you had one with like a beast master, like a heavily armed, like big shield, big poking stick that gives you a lot of reach, and you have a beast going out there, that feels like it kind of leans into the muscle, right? Being used as a guard or a thug. And then there were trollkin variants as well for the shard trollkin, and oh goodness, they have the ability to mutate, to gain mutations, and some of those were really nice. Some things that would make them quite brutal scouts in like a rogue class. I think like Bloodthirst, where you gain a bonus on your attacks each time you attack, and especially with a class that I learned about later, there's one that gets a lot of extra attacks, which would make that quite interesting.
So yeah, talking about classes then, because we get a whole host of new things in this book, which some of which are particular kind of like very Cryxian, and other ones which are more like if you want to play pirates, which is good, because I think a game of Iron Kingdoms where you're literally just the crew of a pirate ship is already fun times. So what things kind of stood out for you that you liked in here?
So I'm going to start. There's two new classes, like two completely new classes with multiple subclasses, and both of these have a little bit of charisma in their important stats.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big sucker for a charisma class, because if you can use charisma to make you good at talking and good at fighting, it means that you have a lot more stats to use for fun roleplay stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it helps that both of these classes were like, ooh, that's interesting. Immediately, Blood Witch, you're casting spells, but you're not using your spell slots, because spell slots is boring. You're using your own hit points.
Yeah.
And that's a neat way of playing. There's some like, I think they have 3 subclasses, and they all feel pretty distinct. They fit into a kind of short rest class as far as like refreshing your abilities go, because in a short rest you can use your hit dice to regenerate some hit points, and that means you have more spells. Someone healing you essentially gives you some spell slots back. So there's some really interesting options for like sustainability there.
Yeah.
I putting my min-maxing hat on again, I was like, if you had a blighted trollkin, one of their mutations is the ability to regenerate to use hit dice mid-combat, and I like the idea of just like, you slash your arm to cast a spell, and they're like, what are you going to slash now? You've not got any more arms, and then they heal their arm immediately to slash it again, and just be like...
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
So, I mean, I think they're meant to be mostly Satrix, is it?
Statixis, yeah.
Statixis, yeah.
So yeah, blood witches essentially are performing magic by bloodletting. There's also, as it says, similar ones, which is the tribal Tharn and the Scorn Bloodrunners. So again, you can use these. You could combine these this class with, if you want to play one of the Scorn or the Tharn, which are in the Tharn is playable in Deep Wilds, and the Scorn are in a PDF supplement. But yeah, that's I mean, that's basically it. You're getting magic from slot. You don't have magic slots. You're just doing spells using hit points to cast them. And then there's one. What is it? So the subclasses are Blood Priestess, which is a particular tradition of the Statixis. They also can use the blood of victims. So that's essentially saying you're going to take blood from other people and use that as a way to power your spells, which makes sense, right? It means you've got essentially a spellcaster that wants to get into combat to get blood on their blades to then use that to cast spells. Blood Seer, which is essentially divination powered by blood and viscera. That's pretty cool. I can see that on a pirate ship being really good. Like, you're trying to see which way to go to navigate the seas and the winds, and you've got a blood seer there who, slices open a small animal or something to read the fates and fortune. That'd be kind of cool.
Oh yeah.
And then what is it? Night witches are even more combat based magic characters. Essentially, yeah, they're just magic, close combat magic monster, masters. So that's good fun. Yeah. Right, what's the next new thing in here as well?
So next class, Raider. Like, you like attacking? You're going to get a lot of attacks. I think when they get to the end of their list, I think they have like 3 additional attacks. So they look like quite a martial character, but not in the same way as like a big frontline like a big frontline brawler. They've got a lot of mobility. They've got a lot of I feel like a lot of crowd control, because with multiple attacks and you can move in the middle of each of them, like you could dart onto the battlefield and slash. One of their things that they can also use guns. So they've got one which is like run and gun. So you can shoot something and then you can move without provoking opportunity. So you can really just like thread your way through the battlefield. And if you don't immediately want to make a terrifying ghost pirate who death cannot stop, then what are you even doing, right?
Yeah, Ghostly Raider is definitely something to build. That's quite terrifying. And then there's archetypes built onto that, so you can play like a commanding officer. So it's basically pirate captain for that one. There we go. The Highwayman that we spoke about is a subclass, and then we've got pirates themselves. So what's Highwayman proficiencies? Yeah, there you go. Your running gun. So I started blasting. That's an Always Sunny reference. Was that at 10th level? You can use your action to expend the magazine of a weapon you're holding against a single target. So if you've got a pistol that's a 6-shooter, you can fire every shot in it. If you hit the target, add +2 to the total damage for each piece of ammunition expended from the magazine, up to a maximum of +10. The next range check against height has advantage. So that means if you expend the entire chamber of bullets in your 6-shooter, you could get plus 10 damage and advantage on the hit roll. That's pretty good.
Yeah, they seemed like quite a lot of fun. And you can play them. You can play them ranged. You can play them melee. Like the pirate is a lot more about kind of actually like slashing and stabbing.
Yeah.
And a lot of these classes as well. Like they've, I see one of the pirate ones has an ability like an ability that lets them kind of deal with has like what's it, complex terrain or ships moving about and how that is quite disorientating. So where you said earlier about like playing as a pirate crew, there's a lot of things here that would get quite nice benefits from being in those situations.
And then moving on, we've got some other subclasses that are like build on existing classes. So for Barbarian, we've got Blood Gorger, which is really quite specific to playing a Shard Isle Trollkin. It's just grisly cannibalism, right?
Yeah, rip and tear, man, rip and tear. Like until the job is done, though, beat them and eat them.
Yeah. I think that's all that needs to be said about that one.
I did think this would be kind of fun to have a ghost.
Fucking hell.
Right, a spectre, like one just like absolutely descending on something, like a flurry of wailing, screaming banshee, like
right.
They in their rage they get unarmed attacks that boost them. And it's like, a furious ghost.
That's pretty. Yeah, that is pretty sweet.
So yeah, I mean, heck, even if that's not one of your party members, like that's a pretty terrifying thing to be like. Today, you're fighting a very angry ghost.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. Actually, you mentioned that. It's like I think you can make singular, powerful NPCs who have a few mooks with them, with these subclasses and races, rather than going like, oh, okay, this fight is like 20 fucking orcs or whatever. Path of the Gladiator. We've basically got a barbarian that is more charisma orientated.
Yeah, like playing. I mean, it's a fighter who is playing up to the crowd, right?
Yeah.
They're used to it's performance fighting, and so there's some like that's actually pretty cool. Like almost like the rage could almost be your fighter getting into character, right? Normally they are mild mannered, like John Fightman, but sometimes they get their rage on and they're Fightman Supreme.
That's cool because Path the Gladiator, even though that's again, some of these classes are not specific to Cryx. So obviously, a Gladiator, there will be gladiatorial arenas across the Iron Kingdoms and beyond. Like maybe less so in Corvus, but as I say, Five Fingers, which is a pirate city on the coast of Western Amoran in the Kingdom of Ord. That's a pretty good one. Or if you get into the wilderness, Path of the Gladiator would work really well with the Scorn or with the Pharaoh in their horrific cities and settlements out in the wilderness. So that's pretty good fun. Bards, we've got Stormsinger, which is essentially, as a bard, you've basically got abilities that manipulate the wind with this one. So it's really about it's environmental manipulation with weather and winds and rains. There's some cool stuff. You can sum up fog. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some like a lot of stuff that I mean. This is one of the classes that I feel most wants to be on a boat.
Yeah.
But there's some interesting stuff there. I mean, if this bard isn't singing sea shanties 24/7, then they're not doing it right. As far as I'm concerned.
And then we've got clerics. We've got these clerics are we've got the blight domain. So essentially, this is like what type of the type of cleric is aligned to the Church of Torok. So again, they're going to have spells which are going to be much more aligned to, as it says, raising the dead, hellfire, necromancy type, anti-life kind of spells.
Yeah.
So pretty much what you expect on the tin with that one.
But absolutely vitally, they can heal undead, right?
Yes, yes. That's the main thing. They can heal undead.
If I have an image of like the party. You've got a party of like Bane. What are the Banes? The subrace of Revenants.
Revenants.
Like you have a party of Revenants and Spectres and just lots of undead, and then you've got like a Blight domain like cleric just like frantically put it like every fight. It's like, whose arm is this? Like, here's your arm. I put your arm back on. I can't do this stuff. And just like,
but it's totally cool to play. It just shows like you can play a party who are sneaking onto the islands of Western Amoran to act for Torok. You're basically his kind of suicide squad. To discover an Orgoth relic or kill a Kadoran commander or something like that, or start a new, find a location to restart a necrofactorum on the mainland. And so you've got this eclectic party of ghosts, undeads, and clerics worshipping Torok, right? And you're going to need someone that can heal the undead amongst you. So that's really fun. Fighter, we've got Marine. Again, this is kind of like Raider, but maybe, but again, is a pirate of sorts. I guess the difference is, whereas Raider was definitely a pirate, a Marine is someone that has more formal training for what they do, because they'll be from an actual fleet of the Iron Kingdoms. So again, they've got abilities that allow them to deal with the difficult terrain of a ship.
Yeah, there's a particular ability they've got that really gives them a synergy between ranged fighting and melee, where you can make an attack and then after making the attack do a dash, whilst dashing switch to a melee weapon and then attack. And that just feels. I've played a lot of games where combat begins and everyone turn one settles into their position and then stands there and just stabs each other for a couple of turns. Like having something dynamic feels pretty cool. And yeah, they feel pretty cool. They've got another ability where they can like shove someone if they move before an attack. So you want to see your Marine like fighting up and down the deck, and he like leaps from somewhere to get a person and shoots the other captain as he's on his ship, and it just it feels like quite a dynamic class, which is cool.
So Shroud Knight is the other one. This is really basically, so you combine it with Revenants, and that basically gives you the Bane Knights from the war game. So you're basically corporeal undead that are scary as shit and can become as shadows and move through, become ghostly temporarily. And you can and you've got you can cast the at a high level. You can cast the animate dead spell. You get it innately, so you can summon more undead around you. That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, they feel quite funky. Like a lot of flavor in all of that, and more to do as a fighter, right? You're not just going to be slapping them with your sword.
I like how you point out in your notes it's the anti-paladin.
Yeah, like I want one of these as a Bane paladin, like especially with the Bane aura that reduces healing, just means that like if you are on somebody fighting them, like that person's going down.
Yeah,
and yeah, like this this class particularly feels like, it is the relentless creeping march to the grave. So
And
yeah, big flavor
yeah,
thumbs up.
and again, it's a fun. It fits in character. Like again, if you've got like a party
Mm.
of characters that are more martial in nature, who are leading raids on within the Iron Kingdom, so you've got like you'll have your Cryxian Warcaster with their Bonejack, uh, and then you'll have maybe, as we said, like your blighted cleric for healing undead with them, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'll have one of those shroud knights as like a bodyguard because they'd be very good for that, and then perhaps a raider to act as maybe as an assassin or somewhat, so or to scout ahead. So there's definitely lots of ways to put together parties that represent different things within the setting.
Yeah.
Then we've got Order of the Witch for gun mages. So obviously, gun mages specific class to Iron Kingdoms, and Order of the Witch is basically it's the fact that the Statixits have a gun mage order, which is where they've got their rune shot pistols, and they've put blades at the end of them. And their rune shot, they paint their runes onto their gunshot with blood. So it's trying to represent that these are very much more of or even they're gunfighters that get really up close and personal.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of loved reading this because initially I was just like, cool. What if I took two guns into a knife fight and then I stabbed you with them?
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, cool, right? That is that is absolutely wild. But they've got abilities that make that work and do some interesting things with it.
Such as they've got
Um,
what they've got pistol stab. Yeah.
Yeah, like what if I took my two guns into a knife fight and then I shot you with them after I stabbed you? Like, yeah, it's felt great. They I think you get to use your rune shots as well, so
Yes.
that means you're just getting even more output. And I think they get what's I think if they hit with both they can do another rune ability or something.
Hailstorm. Yeah. So if you hit the same target with two shots, you can have so each shot you could fire with different rune shot, and then if they both hit the target, you can have a third rune shot also applied.
Yeah, which is pretty nice, especially because they have a couple of their own rune shots that do some more darkly themed magics with some that take some health from the enemy. Um, a crushing vortex. So they're a neat feel of
I'm glad you like them because I designed these ones.
well that
to represent
that's convenient.
what was in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can get them as a unit in the war game, and I was looking at it, I was like, Jesus Christ, these fucking gun mages are mental. Then we've got Gunfighter, which has a particular one, which is Wraith, which really gets the pistol Wraith kind of. It's a weird one, isn't it? Actually, it's like if if you said I want to be a gunfighter, right? So you're not a gun mage, you're a gun fighter.
Yeah.
But I also want to know spells as a normal wizard would know spells.
Yeah, this one took me a couple of minutes sat down with it to just be like, right, why is this not a gun mage? And then I had a look at it, and yeah, it's part of it is like the source, like they've kind of scavenged, bartered, and stolen their arcane secrets.
Yeah.
It's not stuff that comes naturally to them. But they're actually casting spells rather than
rune
shooting
shot.
spells into people.
Yeah, it's a weird hybrid of things, but it's to represent the fact there are particular like pistol wraiths in the game which have spell casting abilities that's not related to their guns.
Yeah, some of their spells
And
are more utility based as well, rather than like, yeah, it's not I'm going to
yeah,
shoot you and do some, and the bullet is going to do some extra kind of damage or some. It's like hasting themselves, or even being able to detect magic or protect themselves.
yeah.
Um,
And then because also they're intelligent, so also it means you can play a gunfighter who has, because a gunfighter is going to be what, mainly dexterity based.
yeah,
But then because spells, that also means taking intelligence advances is of a benefit, because that's what the spell casting runs off in this subclass. So yeah, it's a real weird kind of. And then you can see, like, again, if you combine it with, say, Revenant um or Spectre, you get your pistol wraiths.
yeah. It feels like a good fit with Spectre as well, because having a class that requires two abilities to drive it can be quite intense on the requirements, right? But if you're a Spectre, the fact that you're potentially you might be dumping your charisma or something. Um,
Yeah.
if you get glass cannoned, you can pop back up.
And let's just say, like, again, when you combine some of these things together, they make really fun antagonists. So that uh, ghostly pistolier is who's assassinating people, makes for a fun antagonist in your games where you're not Cryxian. Um,
Mm.
or Cryxian. There's no reason why a pistol wraith is actually, there are plenty of undead that are not aligned with Cryx. Then we've got mechanics, which makes sense because this essentially gets into the specifics of how the Nightmare Empire makes their mechanothralls and their helljacks and bonejacks. So Ironmonger is essentially what if you're is really to go what if you're a mechanic, which is specific to Iron Kingdoms, but you're more strength orientated. So it kind of represents the fact if you're an Ogren or a big Trollkin who likes hammering things, then you hammer things much better, basically. Um, um, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah, like
Um,
visually, like I immediately saw an Ogren with just like a giant wrench or something. For
yeah.
when he needs to wrench the really big bolts or potentially bust a couple of skulls.
And, Necrotex, again, the classic combination for a Necrotech is if you're playing a Revenant. So you play a Revenant, combine it with Necrotech. So you're a mechanic Necrotech Revenant. And that means then you will potentially have, you could buy for yourself, or you can get them at higher levels, definitely, is you can augment yourself. So, you're this undead being who is very good at tinkering and making other undead beings that have buzzsaws for arms. And at some point, you get so good at the stuff that you start also modifying yourself with extra arms, skittering legs, stuff like that. So I think it speaks for itself, doesn't it, James?
Yeah, they like I'm a person who always like once you've played a few games and you've got a little bit in the campaign, I always want to tinker with my characters, and like this feels like a like a character who is also willing to tinker with themselves, like give themselves an extra arm or some different legs or what have you. And like someone told them to go out and make friends, and they took it very literally because they can make themselves little scrap thralls. um and they can play in like moving these little things around plays into how
Yeah.
they get benefits of some of their abilities, and that's
And the
cool.
cool thing you could have then is if you've got another character who is a revenant, yeah,
Mm.
is then the necrotech is the perfect one to go. I'm going to upgrade you further. Let's deal with that arm. Let's make it more killy.
Yeah, and I mean that's some of like a lot of these characters and a lot of these character archetypes go together quite well. There's a lot of neat interactions with them.
Yeah. Then we've got the class for monks, which is the Way of the Dying Hand. This is basically our that's basically our war witch
Mm.
for within within Iron Kingdoms. So again, it's monks which are tied to the blight of Torok and the Church of Torok, and I guess they're kind of embodying the power of that blight.
Yeah, they they seemed really interesting to me because so many of these monks are like, yeah, okay, I achieved my enlightenment and my balance, and I use that to punch your head in. Whereas these ones are like, hey, I have key, like, or I've got my energy, you've got your energy. What if I was to take yours away? What if I was to like manipulating like essentially someone else's key aggressively? I mean, I know key is like just is the resource here. It's not key
Yeah.
within Iron Kingdoms, but actually like cool. It almost like I've perfected instead of perfecting their own soul, they're going out and they're like, I'm going to punch you right in the soul.
Yeah, they're quite vampiric in that sense. Then.
Yeah. There's also an interesting overlap with the I'm gonna butcher their name again. The Satix.
Statixis.
Satixis. They have a unarmed attack with their horns, and I really like monks do additional unarmed damage. I just like the idea of like, hey, I've learned way of the horn, and I'm just going to I'm going to headbutt you to death.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the Soul Reaper ability, the fact that you can consume souls. So, as people in your party kill people around you, you collect souls. That's pretty cool. And then what have we got? We've got Paladin, Oath of Undying. Again, this fits with the Revenants and is another kind of you're basically it's the Bane Knights, but as a paladin to the Church of Torok. So essentially, you're a Bane Knight with even more with spells because you're a paladin. So that's pretty scary.
You can use lay on hands and take someone else's life. Like, yes, perfect.
Is that? Sorry, I forgot where that's written.
That's Ferryman's Touch under Channel Divinity. Like,
oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Like, thank you. Yes, perfect.
That's just horrible.
Yeah, they are awful, and I love them.
Then we got Rangers, Knight of the Vigil. Oh, okay. So this is a knightly order for Signar, which is more related to seafaring. I think we're going to skip past that. We don't need to talk too much about it because we're trying to look at more fun Cryxian things.
I'll do a little thing though. They're pretty good at hunting undead. So if you did have a whole party of undead, this is a good nemesis.
Yeah. But we've got Seafarer, which again is again fits in with the pirates. So again, that could be you could play a Shard Isle Ogren Ranger Seafarer, which would be good, or Trollkin or human or whatever. So that's a way of creating a different flavor of pirate because again, they're going to be quite good at navigating the seas. So that fits in with their kind of style. Rogue, we've got Buccaneer again. So some of these was it Rogue, Raider, Ranger, and then in Fighter we've got we had Marine. They're all just different flavors of pirate or seafarer, where they're taking the classic archetypes and giving them abilities that make them more proficient at sea.
But Buccaneer was one I liked quite a lot of the rogue archetypes. Buccaneer was really interesting because they've got maneuvers, kind of like the Battle Master fighter, and they give you extra things you can do when you're fighting. Like you can like shove things, you can push things around, you can get some extra actions, and that means that you've got more ability to do tricksy things in combat, right? You're not just walking straight up to something and doing a sneak attack on for massive damage. And like more interesting things to do in combat is always more good.
And then we've got necrosurgeons, which is so these are necrosurgeons are able to make thralls, so they're kind of necromancer-ish. They're not necrotechs though, or they're kind of necrotech specialists, but they specialize with thralls. Yeah, so they can make stitch thralls where they basically stitch together lots of different body parts. That's fun.
Yeah, you,
And
you go around collecting all your bits and pieces in a little baggie, and then making a friend later. They also because they know a lot about anatomy, they know exactly where to stab you, so
yes,
they can use their anatomy knowledge to let them do their sneak attacks rather than having to get advantage through flanking or other means.
I've got the Necrotech and the Necrosurgeons. I've got miniatures of those in the recent edition of War Machine because they've basically just made Cryx whole cloth in the new with new miniatures. Yeah, they're fun miniatures. They're cool. Then we've got the monk. Now we've got the War Witch, which is in the rogue. So that this is basically a spell casting rogue.
Yeah, and so knowing classic D&D, the way this differs from something like an arcane trickster is it's all about enchantment and illusion magic. Like it has to specifically pick from those schools. So it's if you want to be a sneaky, like, how do you make your sneaky rogue sneakier? Like illusions, enchantments, really just messing with.
And the other interesting thing about this, with the return of the Orgoth, is you could have a War Witch in the Cryptian Forces be like your main antagonist, because they could be a turncoat. As the Orgoth arrive, they switch sides and maybe have stolen with them important things for the Nightmare Empire. So that makes an interesting antagonist there, because then you could team them up with infernals and demons and so forth. Sorcerer, Dirge Seer. That's a what's a Dirge Seer for sorcerer? So this is a sorcerer that is obviously embodying the arcane energy of the Cryxian blight from Torok, right?
Yeah, like some of that just general corruption, that the undead radiation from Torok has given them the ability to be really undeady with their spells, and they can turn all of their spells into essentially necrotic damage. So it's not just fire, it's undead fire. It's not just electricity, it's undead electricity.
Yeah, fun.
So yeah, that's cool.
But
they're also kind of melee.
Are they kind of melee?
Yeah, they've got a couple of bits that work with melee attacks.
Oh yeah, they've got riposte and
Blight Reaper.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. Getting your sorcerer actually up in people's faces.
Then obviously we've got a sea sorcerer. So that makes sense with both any seafaring faction group, to play a magic user with the abilities and spells to manipulate the oceans. It makes sense.
They've got a neat ability with some of their spells when they're casting certain types of spells. They move themselves around as part of casting it, and that's nice. That you just kind of like a little bit of like movement on the battlefield. It's good. You can reposition yourself. You can get out of trouble. It doesn't provoke opportunity as well. So if you're surrounded, like, sweep yourself somewhere with a flow of water. Like, that's pretty cool.
And then we're on to the Warcaster. So Warcasters are the spell users in the game that can control. So they bind to them warjacks and things that have what do we call it? Rune plate. So rune plate is essentially can exist on armor and on weapons, and it allows them to channel from their arcane generator on their backpack arcane energies into these weapons, and so that's how they manipulate arcane energy as well as their innate arcane abilities. So essentially what this is you're going to play a warcaster that knows necromancy pretty much, or obviously necromantic themed necrotic spells, to put it that way. So that's fun. I don't think there's much more in there other than, again, there's things to do with the fact that there are traits and abilities that show that you're going to embody the blight of Torok and of that necromantic energy.
Mm-hmm.
But also with Warcaster, we also get Swashbuckler, which basically is you're a Warcaster at sea. So you're going to have, it's a Warcaster with more weather, ocean, environmental type spells like that, as well as being good on the oceans and not falling over type things.
They've got an interesting bit where they can take themselves, they can give themselves enough air to breathe underwater for 10 minutes along with their armor. So like even the fishes are not going to be safe from your Warcaster.
Then we got Wizard, which again we've got some stuff there to do with. This one is for soul manipulation, which is going to be another. So I guess within Cryx, you've got the people that can manipulate bodies and cadavers.
Mm.
There's the people that manipulate bodies and cadavers and then stitch to it mechanica. Then you've got so that's some, and there's those that can raise raise people back from the dead, and then you've got these guys who are manipulating souls. So they're interesting because obviously that's going to relate to like how you can put a soul of a person into another body, which is going to be quite important if you say, a particular warcaster of the Cryxian forces maybe dies and their body is blown apart, but you've rescued their soul, and you're going to and someone's making a new body for them. That's what this wizard, this soul weaver, that would be their task, is to help put that soul into that new vessel.
Yeah, like I mean, they can also bottle. Yeah, they can bottle the souls up as well as they're going, can't they?
Yeah, you can bottle souls up, and as we know, there are certain characters that can use souls as a resource for their magic abilities. So, yeah, you're basically out there stealing souls and using them, which is fun. Then and that's all the new subclasses and classes. There's some stuff on multi-classing to be like essentially being like you might want to combine these things together and proficiencies, and there are definitely combinations in multi-classing that would make sense.
Yeah. I'm going to total it up just because, like, going through these, I was like, man, this feels like this section's been going on for a while. There are 22 subclasses in the book, not including the ones for the 2 new classes.
Well, I think it's because I think it's the thought process is that while you can use any D&D book out there with Iron Kingdoms Requiem, as in that book, plus the D&D SRD, plus any of the Iron Kingdoms expansion books, it's all self-contained. So and they're self-contained to the extent that if there is a character type, model type in the war game that you love and you want to play as, then the tools are there to allow you to do that.
Yeah, like there's a lot of stuff there, but it feels neat, and it feels like it's opening up a lot of doors.
So, given that I would say, out of the two of us, you've got definitely more experience with the wider D&D. How does the toolbox of things there feel so far compared to what's out on the market?
I think some of the ones that are more piratical, you might have certain analogues in other books where you're going for a more pirate theme, but a lot of the really like a lot of the things you're getting very fresh are a lot of the necromantic and the undead options. Those are really neat. Like the two new classes. Like, I mean, this book gave me 2 more charisma classes, and I was like, yes, thank you, great.
Yeah.
Like I honestly was like really interested in how a Blood Witch would play. like what that's going to be like in combat, where you're balancing your health and like you cast a big spell and then you're like, please heal me, like I got to go stand at the back for a minute because now I've put myself in danger. Um, uh, like Blood Gorger felt like it would be just a really like brutal barbarian to be like, not a like, oh ho ho, this is our barbarian who's always angry all the time. It's like, oh my god, this is our guy who eats people.
Yeah.
Like don't get close to him. And yeah, even things like the rogue, like the necrosurgeon, just struck me as like, I would not have thought to play a rogue like that, and now you can. That's because I was like, why on earth is this guy a medic? And then I read the character, but like the character page, and it was like, oh, okay, they're not exactly a medic. They're they're more building new bodies rather than fixing existing ones.
Yeah, they're sneaking about the battlefield and stealing body parts, which is great. So yeah, the game then the book also introduces some backgrounds. So these are ways that you can theme things a bit more for the Nightmare Empire. So again, we've got so we'll briefly go through the list. I'm not going to go through all the additional like gumph they add on, but like just to explain what this book gives you and how then we can work out things that we want to run. Black Fleet Raider, obviously, you're going to be members of the Cryxian fleet. So you're going to get proficiencies and abilities and equipment that's going to be very seafaring and pirate-like. And you can get tattoos. That's fun. And there's some tables for characteristics and stuff. A Blackwater pit fighter. So that means you're from the settlement of Blackwater, but you've been fighting in the arenas there. So that's kind of cool if you just want to play a group of arena fighters and so forth. For kind of like, you could almost think of Gladiator. Like you could be someone that's like who owns the caravan, and then the rest of the group are like the maybe a performer, a bard who announces all the fighters for the gladiatorial fight. Then you've got someone who is the gladiator or two. That's kind of cool, going city to city and then being hired to fight, because if you fight in an arena, you must be pretty good in a battle. Blackwater urchin as a background. Basically says you're a thief that lives in the city of Blackwater amongst the pirates there. Broken Coast smuggler, so you're a smuggler. Hospices, which means you're into divination and a well-known mystic, using whatever form of divination that you like. A whaler. A Meridius whaler. So basically, it makes you a bit more Monster Hunter.
Oh, you've activated my interest there. But yeah, that's an interesting one.
That's fun.
Yeah, being on a boat, but you're not necessarily like the same kind of martial as a lot of these other classes are kind of pushing you,
right? Naval officer, that speaks for itself. Press ganged, you are a member of the crew but not out of choice. A shard diver, which means you're a submariner. You go diving in a diving suit to look for treasure and so forth. That's fun. A shipwright, that fits with engineers and mechanic for and artificers for like building ships. So again, makes sense. Street necromancer, which basically says you live in the shadows, in the streets, collecting knowledge, and you're performing necromancy.
So they're not bringing streets back from the dead?
No.
Oh, okay. Not
but you
that
grew
kind of
up on the streets to become a necromancer. Treasure hunter, that makes sense. And then there's the adventuring companies, which are the things that you can join your characters together to form groups that gain again some certain benefits. There's the 4-Star Syndicate, which is a group of pirates who live in Five Fingers, and you can align yourself to one of the captains of that syndicate, and there are a whole bunch of benefits for that. And as you go up the levels, you can, you eventually you're rising to power to literally being the right hand men of one of those pirate captains. The League, Macarian League traders, again, that's kind of like smugglers and pirates and traders there. You could be a member of the Navy, so again, you could be a part of the the fleet of the Nightmare Empire, or maybe of Cryx, and so you're a group. The crew. You're basically the crew of a ship, and again, you get a ship for that. And then we got Sea Hunters, so that fits with the whaling kind of concept that you go out looking for big game out in the oceans. Smugglers, don't need to say much more about that. Slaughter Fleet Raiders. This is basically you're playing Trollkin pirates and Ogren pirates. So pretty much speaks for itself. You're going to have those blood gorger Trollkins amongst the rest of them. So those are all the particular groupings, and then I think what gets added into the book further, there's a whole load of extra spells for doing all your necromancy and so forth. They're all very dark, death, necrotic, corrosive spells, which is all very useful. Then there's about what makes an Iron Lich. So again, that's useful for if you want to make an Iron Lich as both an antagonist, or a character may even ascend to being an Iron Lich. That would be pretty spectacular. And then we've got about Necrotite and Necrotech, and there's a bunch of new equipment that fits many of the classes that we had in there, and also Necromechanica. What we talked about, the Necrotech prosthetics. So if a character loses an arm and someone's playing a Necrotech, they could always stitch to them a new arm. Bonejacks and Helljacks. So if you play your Cryxian Warcaster, there are Warjacks for them to control, which are all really fun and have their own particular weapons, which are again going to be necrotic, venomous, polluting kind of effects, and have various things. But also this book has naval steamjacks. So these are steamjacks that are designed to go out and about on ocean-faring ships. And the fun thing about some of these is that they can also operate underwater. So for a period of time, they can basically become aquatic, which is good fun. There's a bunch of like equipment that would allow you to work at sea or go underwater. And then there's a section on antagonists. So it gives you some examples of the things we spoke about, like a Priest of Toruk, or a Blood Gorger, or a Dirge Seer, or an Ironmonger, or the members of the Ghost Fleet. So, you've got zombie pirates that you can fight against, or ghostly pirates, or pirates in general, or necromancers, or war witches, or members of the Broken Coast Fleet. So they're the humans, and Sat6 raiders and sea witches. So there's quite a lot of good antagonists in here. Actually, I forgot how many good ones they are. They're basically perfect examples of what you could play, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's handy to not have to necessarily go through and be like, okay, I'm going to take a character and then I'm going to put this class on them and things. A lot of these are like, okay, cool. This makes it a lot easier to be like, I want the shooty ghost, for example.
So to wrap up, then, like, what type of because obviously I have my ideas. I know the Iron Kingdoms quite well. For you, what kind of like groups of characters or story potential kind of pops up for you?
Man, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking of earlier is like there was a section saying like revenants aren't necessarily bound to a necromancer, right?
Yeah.
And I had the thought of, what if there was a group of people who had fought their way into Cryx or something, or they've ended up at a place where the blood of Turok is, and they've turned into revenants and undead, and their quest essentially is to get home, right?
Yeah.
All they're looking for is to leave wherever they are and return to their home so they can be laid to rest or something. You know, their unfinished business is getting back. Like that's a way that you could be in this situation without necessarily being on board with all the Cryxian stuff. So you know, you might be a Signar, like, yeah, a Signar Revenant or something. I quite liked that. I liked where we talked about earlier with like the Cryx party of just like, you know, you're literally a like ragtag falling to pieces battle squad, or like raiding party going out and being patched back together was neat.
Yeah, being a Suicide Squad is kind of good. I mean, you could also play a group going out hunting the forces of Everblight. So you could go out into the wilderness to the to the to the the harsh wintry north and deal with the wilderness that way. That would definitely put them kind of out of their depth, but and exploring places far from the Iron Kingdoms. We mentioned Five Fingers, which is the pirate city at the mouth of the Dragon's. Is it the Dragon's Tongue River? But basically, it's a pirate city, you know, at the mouth of this river as it reaches the seas and leads further out. Then on, you know, from there you could go to Cryx. There's definitely like with those pirate kings, there's a lot of like political intrigue. So I think there's definitely value playing Cryxian characters who can offer stuff that normally other people can't. Like, oh, you want to bring this person back from the dead so you can interrogate them. Oh, you need a spy. Well, we've got someone in our party who's a ghost. They're pretty good at spying because they can't be. Yeah. They can just walk through walls and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of fun. Like, you know, being that extra faction in what are relatively mortal affairs. Then you could play the treasure hunting kind of game with them, like, because again, like we said, there's this propensity to like investigate and look for like Orgoth relics or hunt down infernals to steal their knowledge and power.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, like, if you're going after infernals, there's a lot of character options in this where you could really be like, you know, you are our bounty hunters essentially. Like we've got word on this, and you guys need to infiltrate into enemy lands, get to this place, and slay something, you know, slay something really quite scary.
Yeah,
and then get like exfiltrate afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Let's think. What else is there? I mean, there's definitely you also get some interesting interplay between different types of undead. So, you know, as if you were a Cryxian warband, you know, cadre out doing something, for whatever reason, you could easily run into, say, if you were out in the wilderness trying to find like an old Orgoth tomb, you could quite happily run into a you might, because you'd be out in the wilderness, maybe near the blind water marshes, right? That's where the Gatormen predominantly have lots of settlements, and some of the Gatormen, the Gatormen wizards and sorcerers there. Some of them have the ability to raise people from the dead or raise creatures from the dead, so they have their own form of necromancy and manipulating souls. So you could have quite an interesting kind of conflict between two different groups that are obviously able to summon undead fighters to them. So that's quite curious and fun.
Yeah. Like, how does that work? If I'm a necromancer and I raise your body, and another necromancer raises your soul, like, you know, that's a, like, I mean, heck, maybe
that's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, but I mean, heck, that's an idea for a quest there, right? Someone's been
shit. Someone's stolen your dead body and turned it into a mindless thrall, and you're a ghost, and you're offended by what they've done to your body.
Yeah,
that is quite fun. The other things, obviously, another city which is quite good is Corvus. because Corvus is known as the city of ghosts, and it's continually sinking into the ground, and used to be a Orgoth settlement. So again, you could be involved in the criminal underground of that city, trying to influence and steal stuff from Signar or assassinate people. Um,
Where was the place we did our last thing on? Was it Lael?
Yes, I think it was. No, the last when you that was Corvus. I think it's been a while.
There was the city we talked about last time where there were a lot of like mercenary bands.
Oh yeah, that is Leo. Yeah.
So a lot of the classes that are quite pirate themed honestly would work quite nicely as mercenaries.
Oh, of course,
So
definitely.
if you were looking to round those squads out a little bit, like maybe go less on the necrosurgeons and more on the buccaneers,
Oh,
or even the
definitely.
raiders. Like,
Yeah,
there's a lot of options.
This book is, as we said, we didn't really go into what the other peoples of the Shard Islands are like, but they're the other Shard Islands that aren't controlled by Cryx are, obviously home to unaligned pirates and fishermen and whalers and so forth, and they have their own societies and things to contend with. And then I'm trying to think I had a thought of something. And then of course the other thing, like we've hinted at, is that the time period that the RPG takes place in is in this time of relative peace between the Iron Kingdoms, because they all had to be allied together to fight against the Infernals. So there is actually an element of peaceful trade between all of the Iron Kingdoms, including the Empire of Cryx. So it also means you could have some mixed parties of Cryxians with others who are all bound on a common goal of hunting down Infernals. So you could go that far, and it wouldn't be against the setting that you have a Cryxian, like, let's be crazy, like a Cryxian necrosurgeon in amongst a party of, like, a Cadoran warcaster and a Signaran rifleman, all tasked with hunting down an Infernal, and they're working working in conjunction with the Order of Illumination.
I like the idea of the necrosurgeon being in a squad and being like, I'm a medic. I've been sent with you to be a medic. And they're like, oh yeah, cool. And he's like, yep, cool. I'm just, what's in your big bag? It seems to be getting heavier as we go. It's like, don't ask what's in the bag until eventually.
Parts.
Yeah.
You lost your hand. Supplies. I can deal with that for you. Oh, this isn't my hand, but it is a hand. Yeah, that is kind of amusing. Yeah, so overall, I mean, James, what do you make of this book and how it adds options for role playing then?
I think like there's a lot in this book, and I always think a book is successful if when you're reading through it, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I've almost started filling in a character sheet in my head already.
Right. Yeah.
As soon as you go like, okay, this isn't just like a bunch of abilities. This is gonna be my, like, my ghost blood gorger, right? Like I'm a ghost that's gonna eat your bodies and rip you to pieces. I was like, that's a bizarre but terrifying build, and I'm all for it. And yeah, I kept hitting classes and archetypes that I was like, I can see myself making something fun with this. So I think there's a lot of options. Like there's a lot of martial options in this book, but that's not to say that there aren't enough like spellcasters and utility.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what other books So there's two other books that came with this Kickstarter. There's one which is called Tales from the Blackwater Cantina. So it's basically you can play them as separate one shots, but they're all piratey kind of ish themed adventures. And then there's another one called Scoundrel's Guide to the Shard Islands. So again, it's further kind of story material and information about the Shard Isles. And I'm trying to think what else is in there. Let me just grab it. That's a book. What's it say on the back? Further exploration. Oh, sorry, it's got further rules for how you create, control undead known as thralls. So that's brilliant if you're playing those character types. More magical items for pirates and privateers, new monsters, that even the undead fear. Excellent. Let me just have a look at the contents, the index. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this book adds for Iron Kingdoms, it adds ship-to-ship combat, which is good. That's a useful thing to have, because I don't think that's... I'm trying to think, mostly it's in some... That type of thing exists somewhere in D&D, but, if you're going to play Iron Kingdoms...
you need to go deep into some of the supplements. I think like Saltwater Marshes in D&D has it, but it's like, it's not part of the core rules, and it may well have been retconned in a later book or like partially overwritten in other places, and it's just a bit of a nuisance.
So there's a whole lot of how to build your ships, ship types, weapons on the ships. So it's literally it is the guide to piracy, which is great. Then there's like there's hazards of the sea and omens and taboos of the sea, and things you can do. Then there's a section on adventuring in the Shard Isles. So it's like, are you heroes, explorers, entrepreneurs? Things like, and basically it's a book of like, there's a section like on small events and things you can look at or occur, and how to deal with like, and it's basically some random tables on like, random event tables that you can make use of to make the game a bit more interesting, or people you could meet or ships that you could encounter. So that's fun. There's a random island generator, and that's useful. Then there's Treasures of the Nightmare Empire. So this is all magical items and equipment if you want to be playing particularly, Cryxian forces. There's like bone cleavers, big swords for your war witches, or and then there's, like I said, there's rules on crafting thralls. So it's literally really like, what type of thrall do you want to create, and some example stats for them, and you can give them further abilities, and you can, here we go. You can make a thrall with a built-in timed bomb on it, so it can literally walk forward and blow up. That's fun. Stuff about Banes. Oh, and then, oh god, here we go. This is things that even the undead fear. So we've got rules for Bane Lord Tartarus, who is one of the he's one of the Lich Lords. So 142 hit points. Fun. Bane Witch Agathea. So she was actually the warcaster you got in the War Machine 3rd edition starter set for Cryx. So they've got a full-blown stat line for her, which is, again, horrific. You look at it and you're like, challenge rating 16, 180 hit points. She's a tough cookie.
I'm trying to think. I think she sounds familiar from an old scenario you might have played with me and Sam.
No, that's Alexia, I think you're thinking of.
Okay.
Who is a necromancer, but she is not Cryxian. She's a good guy. We've got black trolls. So these are the trolls that exist on the Shard Isles, who are obviously blighted. Various horrible insects, various horrible blighted beasts, and how to... So essentially it's how to take the creatures that are in the Monsternomicon for Iron Kingdoms and, make them more freaky. The Brine Thrall, you'll really like, James, is a it's basically what happens if you get a shark, a really massive shark, and you do some necrotech on it.
Oh, nothing good, I think, is the answer to what happens.
So
to
yeah,
that.
it's got like a watertight. So it's got a furnace that can operate underwater. It's got tentacles on it. It's got mechanical contraptions added to its maw to make it more killy. That's fun. There's a miniature for it as well. Carrion thrall, which are like necrotech modified crows. A dragon knight. Oh, what's that? That's again more thralls. Iron Lich Overseer, Scarlock Thrall. Again, there's a lot of stuff in here. It's just antagonists, even if you're playing against the forces of Cryx. A Wraith engine that's possesses things. So yeah, there's a lot there to make use of. Cool. Okay, that brings us to the end, I think, of this episode. So ultimately, the point is, there's a lot of things you can use in that main book and the other things to either play games where you're pirates or involving pirates in some way, for whichever faction you might want your characters to be from, or play characters who have some necromantic abilities, or are ghosts, or are undead of some form, or from the Shard Isles, or are all minions. You'd be minions of the Empire of Cryx and doing their foul works. So you want to play a warcaster who has Helljacks, or you want to be a Scarlock, which is basically a revenant that does magic, or you want to be a ghostly pistol wraith, or a blood witch who's a gunfighter, a Satixis blood witch gunfighter, no less. There's a lot of new combinations in this book for Iron Kingdoms, and there's miniatures for them. Most of them, I think, are out of print these days, so you're going to have to find them on the secondhand market, but still, you can always, have some fun and look for some miniatures and get some ideas from them. Any other final remarks, James, or are we done?
I think that's it.
Cool. Right, so if you've enjoyed this episode, please email us at darkdaysradio@gmail.com. You can find us at Dark Days Radio on most social media. So that's Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, etc. We'll follow this up with another by looking at some other stuff. So we could look at another kingdom. We haven't covered Kador yet, have we?
Ooh, don't think so.
That'll be fun to talk about. Kador is a fun place. Very Slavic with lots of ice magic and very big, heavy warjacks. That'll be fun to cover. Cool. Again, thank you, James, for going through things and for your opinion on things and insight.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And that's all for now. So goodbye.
Goodbye.